Hello, everyone, and welcome to the National Widowers Organization and the Men's Grief Network monthly webinar. Our webinars. With our webinars, we seek to provide grief support to those who've lost a spouse, partner, and a significant loved one. The NWO is a nonprofit group bringing men together in grief. Our organization is led by experts in loss, many of whom are widowers and others who have grieved significant deaths. I'm NWO board member Adam Larson, and I'm here with fellow widowers and board members Joe Walco and AJ Coleman. And today we're going to talk about changing the roles after losing the death of a loved one, the death of a spouse, the death of something significant in your life, and it changes your role. And so, guys, I don't know who wants to start, but how did your roles change? How did your world? I mean, obviously, your world changes when you lose a spouse, but how did your world change? How did your role change as you had that started that grief process?
I'll go first, Adam. And hello, everyone. Joe Walco coming to you from Pittsburgh, PA. When my wife died 12 years ago, literally the entire rug of my existence was pulled out from underneath me. My roles up to that point was to be the breadwinner. And I'm the breadwinner. I'm going to go to work. My wife was a stay-at-home mom. She took care of the kids. She did the cleaning. She did the laundry. She took care of the house. She paid the bills. I showed up, handed over my paycheck, and all was happy. So we had our roles split, and we knew what to do. We were also a couple. So our social situation, our friend situation revolved around being a couple and so on and so forth. And all of these things instantly changed when my wife died of cancer 12 years ago. And the biggest change for me was I suddenly had to be Mr. Mom. And again, I didn't do any of this. My my wife came home. Hey, they were clean. They were fed. They were relatively, happy and things like that. And she did all that work, and it was a full time job. But certainly was happy that she was doing that. But I'd come home. I'd go to the ball games. I'd stop at the store and get some diapers and milk, things like that. But that was it. And then I remember the the first time going to the supermarket after my wife died, and I now had the grocery shop. Holy cow! There's a whole other world out there of stuff you have to buy. I mean, I knew exactly where to get the milk and the diapers, and that was it. And going to a modern supermarket is ridiculously overwhelming. There's just so many choices now, and I had never done that. Um, Laundry. I didn't even know where the laundry room was. And somewhere down in the basement, I heard noise. Sometimes some steam would come up from there and things like that. But I had to call someone. How do you work this machine? And I can laugh about it now. At the time, it was very daunting. These are things that I didn't want any knowledge of, and I never wanted to do. But the world had different plans for me, and I had to learn this. And that change in role from going to hands off father to you're doing everything was ridiculously traumatic. And we can fall back and look at Mr. Mom and the movie Mr. Mom, and tons and tons and tons of examples I could give of the exact same thing happening. I'll give one quick one here right now. So the first Christmas, which was about 6 months after my wife had died. Now she did everything for Christmas too. She started the day after Halloween decorating. She started buying, the kids' presents on January 2nd, right after the holidays were done, and Christmas was her thing, and Christmas was not my thing. And it's a week before Christmas, and I'm just starting everything. And needless to say, it was a complete disaster in terms of what the kids and the families were expecting based on how my wife Debbie used to do things, but it was the way I did it. And it culminated in, I'm up at 3 in the morning wrapping presents and everything. And 2 hours later, the kids are up and they come down for Christmas, and oh, Santa came, Santa came. Oh, this is wonderful. They're all excited. I'm thinking, okay, I got this. I did pretty good. And I start pulling out the presents and handing them to him. And my oldest said, "Oh, wow, that's pretty weird. Look, Santa wrapped everything in happy birthday." wrapping paper. And right then, I'm like, oh my God. It never even, I grabbed the first wrapping paper I saw in the basement and wrapped everything, and it all said happy birthday. And at that point, I was truly devastated, having no sleep and thinking, I can't do this. I went from, okay, maybe I can pull this off to, I'm a failure at this. You guys know that up and down you go through when you're going through grief. But then my youngest came to the rescue. He was only 9 at the time, and he said, "Oh, I know why. That's because it's Jesus' birthday." It was like, out of the mouths of the kids. So, if we were scripting this, AJ, in a movie, that's certainly something that it still pains me to recognize that I did that, but it turned out okay. But the stress of changing roles, I cannot understate how hard that was,
Mm,
because I still had to maintain my other roles, which were working way too much full time, and all the things that went along with that. I just had to layer this on top. Plus, you got to be a therapist if you got little kids. So they have different needs, and you need a therapist yourself. Well, men don't go to therapy, right? That's not our role. We're the Marlboro man that rides off in the Cowboys into the sunset smoking a cigarette, and we don't go to therapy. And these new roles put a lot of stress on you, and they also stress your old roles too. And and for folks who may not have children, I'll go back to the couple analogy, the social situations.
mhm,
Your entire existence is probably around going to dinner as couples, going out on outings as couples, and suddenly you're the fifth wheel, or the third wheel, whatever it is, and people are kind of leery of you too. How do they treat you, especially at the beginning? Are you too fragile to talk to? Should we
mhm,
bring it up? Should we not talk about it? And juggling those roles too. So, as we discuss this topic, we'll probably dive into the three of our experiences, which focuses mostly on the ridiculously challenging roles of being mom and dad. But
mm.
I just want to let the audience know that this applies to more that it's really about the stress of taking on new roles. So let me turn it over to AJ. AJ, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the role stressors that you had following the death of your wife too.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Joe. It was 15 years ago I lost my wife to cancer, and our daughter was just over a year old. And, when you have children, you leave the hospital, you think you have everything you need because you're relying on your spouse a little bit, right? You can play, for those that like basketball, you can play zone defense here. Um, and I'm still looking for the rules of the game. Here we are 15 years later. I'm still looking for the manual on how to raise a child. But it was definitely a challenge because domestically challenged as I am, I had to learn very quickly about the laundry. When you do your own laundry, you just throw everything in the washer and dry. You don't care what it comes out with because
Yeah.
it is what it is, right? But when
Yeah.
you have children, you're kind of taught that things go in separate loads, different aspects for that. The cleaning I had down, but the cooking, I didn't know how to cook. I didn't even know how to turn the oven on. I had an oven that I still don't even know how. I can use a microwave. But it was like some challenges right off the bat. And then with a young one, it's interesting, right? It's all about perception, right? Everybody's looking at you as a young widower and saying, okay, how are you going to raise your child on your own now? Whether you have one or Adam having like four young ones, how you, and so everything matters. Like every detail is looked at with just high regards. So I had to go shopping for clothes,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and with my daughter who's like one, I didn't know how to match up the outfit. So I started looking for everything that came in like the pants or shorts with the set, right? I couldn't figure out the dress. I couldn't figure out like, and I'm like treating this thing like as a male perspective. Well, do I keep the neck covered up? Do I have a little bit, here and then put a neck? Like you start dressing it like it's a doll, right? And as the days go by, the years go by, I'm still dressing her. Got to the point where I couldn't match anything up once she hit 4 or 5 years old because the outfits don't, they don't come together. You have to. So I started buying everything like polo brand because she had all the polo dresses, all the polo shirts, every different color. She had everything else. And because I didn't know what others were going to perceive so the worst compliment I could get would be like, oh, he overdresses her, all the time. Like she go to a play date, a party that's gonna be like in a jungle area or something, and she's wearing a polo dress. Again, I don't know, right? But it you kind of learn the roles and what work. I mean, our dinners, half the time we were ordering out. Or if I made something, I didn't know how to make a vegetable. I didn't even know what vegetables, how to make any of this. So sometimes we'd have pasta, like mac and cheese, but no vegetable. And then I have to substitute that with a cookie or something because I didn't really get the whole concept. And you come out of this with like a really new appreciation for moms today and the amount of work that they go through just running the house. And a lot of times, men can run the houses as well, but at the time, we talk about roles, right? And just trying to navigate through picking the child up at school, right? Dealing with the birthday party. That was a whole nother experience when you go as a male to a birthday party as a child with a child
Oh,
and the amount of gossip. I knew who hated who. I know who was having an affair. I knew all this other stuff. I'm trying not to listen, but at the same time, I'm intrigued because I don't want to be standoffish. But I had nothing to contribute because this is well before the Real Housewives of whatever city it's on TV now. But it was definitely life changing, and you have a new appreciation. I'm still learning, right? I mean, my daughter once said to me, um, it's really a funny story, actually. I was standing a little too close to the street, and cars were whizzing by, and I was still safe. My daughter pulled me back by the arm, and she must have been 8 years old, and go, "Daddy, you cannot die before I get my first period." And I looked at her like, "What did you just say?"
wow.
And I'm like, I don't even, are we there yet? Are we happy? So as a parent, Mr. Mom, you're thinking like,
Mhm.
where are we today? Like, forget about all the dad roles, playing, doing this and that. You're now focusing on your child and trying to meet what their development needs. That was extremely challenging for me. I mean, I have more stories that I can share that I think will tickle the audience, but you know, the role you get thrown into, just balancing, it takes a toll on you. I remember, falling asleep, very quickly at 11, 12 o'clock at night and not even realize I didn't even change out of my clothes. I'm still in the same work clothes that I came home with after the routines. But as you look back today, I always joke around, I think I've done a really great job transitioning things, helping my daughter grow. I'm sure I found ways to mess her up as well. But uh, but yeah, I mean, there's no blueprint for what we do as dads, as moms, and you just have to appreciate. And what I've learned is just do the best you can.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here real quick on a point Adam AJ brought
Mhm.
up, and so when we think about grief, the classic way to get through grief for the last 20, 30 years has been the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief: the anger, the denial, all the things, ending and acceptance. But the process that's really come into vogue in the last few years based on the research has been the dual processing model.
Mm.
And this goes to a lot of what we're talking about here. So when someone close to you dies, you have the unbelievable loss side of things, and you have to grieve what you lost, and you have to grieve what you had, the loss of your dreams, the loss of all the things like that. But on the other side of that are all the new roles and the new challenges you have to take on. That's where we're focusing now. But
Hmm.
that tension between um, the old and the new is really where the stress lies. So you have these two competing forces that you're switching back and forth. And our brains aren't very good at switching back and forth to those on massive topics like that, especially as you guys know, it might be in the same instant. Like AJ, your story. I mean, when she told you that on the street corner, I mean that's it. That's it. You got to be there for her future. But wow, you're the one that has to deal. Your wife should have been dealing with that, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's where the stress really comes in this dual process model. So just a side note on it, if anyone wants to
Hmm.
look that up, there's lots of literature out there, very, very, very fascinating. But we'll talk about what that looks like
yeah.
on the street. So sorry
Yeah,
about that, Adam.
the kids say the darndest things, right?
I,
And I didn't even know that she even knew about that.
Yeah.
And you're looking back and you're like, what did you say? Like, are we there yet? And I'm thinking, what now? And then you go and Google everything like that, and then you're like, your kid's sitting next to you, and all this like weird stuff pops up. You have no idea what you're looking for. You have no idea what. Then you got to go call a friend and say, hey, this is what was said. You want to
Yeah.
help me understand where I'm going with this? But I mean, Adam, you've had it tough too. I know that.
Yeah, it was. I think for me, the hardest part was trying to be mom and dad emotionally, um, because a lot of times kids generally navigate toward their moms for comfort. Because the mom was, whether they were breastfed or not, the mom is that comfort person, and the dad's not normally the comfort one. And I suddenly had to become the comfort one too. I was cool with cleaning, cooking. I could do all those things. I've been doing that stuff since I was 18. So like that stuff didn't bother me as much. I could jump in and be part of like manage the household, because my wife and I kind of did those things together as I worked from home and she was homeschooling. We created the curriculum together. We did all that stuff together. But when it came to being that emotional support, it's that I suddenly had to tap into something I hadn't really tapped into. I was never really an emotional person. I never really tapped into my emotions. I couldn't really share how I felt. And my wife was the one who was pushing me to become better at that. And I don't think I had fully come to that moment yet. But with her passing, suddenly I was forced to be, oh, here I go. I have to learn how to be in touch with my emotions because these four little ones need me. And when I would go on a trip or I'd have to leave for a few hours, seeing the looks in their eyes, realizing, oh wow, they're having like separation anxiety, kind of like you, AJ. You can't die before I have my first period. Like getting that. I was getting those kind of looks at me when I'm trying to, if I needed to leave. About 8 or 9 months after my wife passed, my grandfather died. It was my mom's dad, and I really felt like I needed to go to the funeral, but it was in Michigan. And so at the time, I was just like, all right, I had some other family come and stay with the kids, and I flew to Michigan for 3 days. But the kids were like, it was really hard for them to see me go because I'm flying. There's always risks anytime you travel, yada yada yada. But of course, that separation anxiety that comes, and learning how to comfort them, learning how to be there when they're crying, learning how to um, be that person, that emotional support, learning to hear them when they're having those moments. And as I was learning how to be present in my emotions, in my those as those waves of grief hit me, and as I was trying to navigate through life, then when the waves of grief would hit them, I realized, okay, let me be present with them in that moment. If they're crying, just sit there with them. Don't tell them they don't have to cry. Like, no, it's okay to cry. And I think uh, as a society, we're coming to a better place. I know Joe and you and AJ it was like definitely a different moment when you guys had started your grief process. But as we're coming to a different moment in our society where we're recognizing the the neurodiversity among all of us and how everybody sees things differently, and how we don't have to follow those gender normative ways of doing things, and it's okay to cry, it's okay to go to a therapist, it's okay to do those things, it's okay to process your feelings. I think that's good for society, but it's taken a long time to get here because, the whole reason the Men's Grief Network was started was because they didn't feel like they had support as men because all the literature out there was for widows. Nobody thought that men needed support and grief, but yes, we do because we're humans too. We cry, we feel, and so when that role change hit is like, you suddenly have to you have to be two people for these kids who are used to having two people. And then the other side of it is suddenly I don't have a best friend anymore. My wife, I could say, was my best friend, and suddenly that best friend is gone. And so, like Joey, you were saying, like you go to different settings that you would have maybe gone with your wife, and suddenly you feel like you're the fifth wheel. Everybody kind of looks at you like, "Oh, you're
Yep.
here," and you're like, "Please don't look at me that way. I don't want your
Yep.
pity." But that's what they would look at you like. And I actually found myself slowly pulling away from the
Yep.
people that
Yep.
my wife and I would hang out with together, and I slowly pulled away from those people because I didn't feel that same connection, and I just felt their pity as opposed to their love, and it was really weird. And so there's certain people from that time that I still keep in contact with, but there's other people who, those relationships naturally kind of ended because we no longer had that connection. And I'm sure folks who are listening have kind of felt that same way, and I'm sure you guys have had those experiences as well, where you have that loss, that changing role of friend groups. The friend groups change because you're going through something different, and the people that you were friends with before may not be those friends who are on the other side of your journey. And so it's just a really challenging thing as you navigate step by step by step as you're going.
Yeah, Adam, that's on a podcast that we had earlier, on another podcast, you mentioned about the tools, right? We,
Yeah.
we never come out with the same tools that we had going in, and that's definitely what relates to people and your friends, right? Because the memory they have are with the two of you, and now there's only one, and that's painful for them. So your
Yep.
tools are different, right? And you start gravitating away from that because at times, you long for companionship too. And not talking about just dating. I'm just talking about just having normal adult talk. When you have small children, you feel like you're always talking, reading baby books, talking little things, talking to
Yep.
little people. Then you go to the grocery store like Joe, and you're completely lost in there. And then somebody asks if you need help. You're like, can you help me, please? You're talking to them like you're talking to your kid, right? Um, but in a prior podcast, when you mentioned those tools, those same tools apply to the social settings that we experience as Mr. Mom,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
it's not as common. Now, maybe today it's a little bit more common as we become more accepting in society, and social media has enabled us to have a soft spot for certain interests. But I, I mean, there are times where I would go out by myself and I just needed a night off, just a night to myself, just to go there. And I go and I just want to just think and just normalize things. And it's tough, right? I mean, my daughter's 16 years old now, and she still wants me to put her to bed every single night. Like if I'm out with a group of people, by 11 o'clock, I start getting that tap. When are you coming home? Are you going to be out much longer? You know, I'm tired. I want to go to sleep. And at first I thought, this is weird, right? And then I talked to a therapist of hers about this. And what she's doing is still mourning the loss of her mother and
Yep.
replacing it with me.
Yep.
And she has that anxiety, like, what if dad doesn't come home?
Yeah.
Yep.
So every night she wants me to still put her to bed. And, people say, how long are you going to keep doing that for? And I thought, like, until she stopped, because how many other parents would love to have this moment, like
Your
with
wife
their
would.
child? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mine sure don't want me to put them to bed anymore.
really, I don't know. But I think you're also, I'm one-on-one, right? You're like, you
Yeah.
have four kids, I know, Joe, you've got more kids as well. And, you can't balance that equal time with each of them that
Yep.
I had. But as a single parent, as a single role, um, you're the one getting the phone call from school, come pick up your child because your child's not feeling well.
Mhm.
You
Yep.
know, us guys would be like, you talk about Adam, like the emotional aspect, where just stick it out. It's probably just a cold. It's probably just a cough. But the
Yep.
mom in you suddenly comes alive. Well, you're flying out of your office, you're getting in the car, you're driving 100 miles an hour to get to your kid because you're concerned, right? And that's how our mentality, our ideas have shifted because we're playing mom and dad at the same time.
Mhm.
The balance is really trying to figure out which one comes out at the right time.
Hmm. One thing
Yeah.
that made me think of was just the changing roles in your children as well. I had my oldest daughter was 11, 12 or something like that. 11, yeah, 11 when her mom died. And as we kind of went along, she suddenly started, I need to cook. I need to make sure the kid, like my siblings are okay. And so she started taking on some of those responsibilities
Oh,
of mom. And I don't think at the time I realized it was happening. I was just kind of like, hey, it's nice to have some help. Let's get things going, but some time away from that, I realized that, she felt like she needed to step up and do those things. And so you might see those roles changing in your children, and learning to navigate that is very tricky, because you also don't want to put down their initiative saying, hey, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's great that you're stepping up, but you don't have to be a parent. And it's helping them learn that, hey, just because you had to take on some of those responsibilities does not mean make you a parent, does not mean you have to be a parent. And it's like helping the children learn to like to find that balance. But I had to learn it and see what was happening first, and it took a little bit to get to that point.
Adam, I had a therapist I was seeing at the time who was seeing all of us. He actually came to the house twice, and he
Oh wow.
taught me. Yeah, it's just an incredible gift. But he taught me that my kids were 3 years apart, that they had two different ways of processing grief at that time,
Mm,
which I had no idea. And he provided the resources I needed to here's how they're going to be as they progress through adolescence and things like that. I mean, what a wonderful gift to have that, because no clue that that was something that I had to worry about. And you learn from that. And the other thing you brought up too that I think is really stressful is you're now the sole decision maker.
yeah.
You used to have a partner,
Yeah.
and okay, so yeah, we got a call from the school. What should we do? Well, now you have to decide that. What are you going to do? And there's no one there to lay in bed at night and bump those ideas off, or more importantly, confess your fears and things like that. Who are
Mm,
you going to talk to? You got to make these decisions on your own. And that point was brought home to me. So my wife died of cancer also, and the day she was actively dying, the whole family came in, and we were all gathered around. This was all her brothers and sisters, all my brothers and sisters, and our parents and everything. And we were all there. And the hospice folks said, "Okay, well, we're going to leave. It's just a matter of time." And I was faced with the first big decision: do I bring my children out to watch
mm,
their mother die? And we're literally gathered around her bed, and I went around to everyone's face. What would you do? What would you do? What would you do? And nobody offered anything. Everyone just put their eyes down and looked. And I realized right then and there, oh my God, this is it. From here on out, all the decisions about my kids are on me.
yeah.
And that was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And but that's a major role change that you have to do in terms of decision making. So just to close that story, my oldest boy was 12 at the time, and he did. I went in and talked to each of them, and he did want to come out and say his goodbyes. I mean, so you
Mm,
talk about ripping your heart out. To watch a 12-year-old say goodbye to his mom. But my 9-year-old, he decided he didn't want to do that. We talked through this, and I said, okay, we're okay with that. And
mm,
he just we did a little private thing in there, and then a couple hours later, I went in and told him what had happened and things like that. Were these the right decisions? I'll never know. I'll never know. Were they some of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my life? You betcha. And that was just the beginning, right? So it's kind of a downer of a story, but this is what grief looks like. These are hard decisions. You're talking about your life, your children's lives, and these decisions we make then have to do that. And you're now thrust into this role that you're completely unprepared for. And it creates a lot of stress, right? It really does.
Yeah.
I think it was really
Well,
important, Joe, that you did that though, that you involved your child in the decision, because it's a huge decision to make. And as 12 years old, and even at 9 years old, allowing them the chance to, hey, you're a part of this decision too. I think it probably meant the world to them at the time. I don't know if they've told you that, but I'm sure it was a hugely important thing for you to do that, and allowing them to be a part of that decision, because you suddenly have lost the person you would bounce things off of. And I totally resonate with that. But I commend you for going to them and saying, hey, do you want to come? Because it's something that you may have regretted, that they may have regretted, that they never got the chance, but you gave them the opportunity. And whether they regret their decision or not, that's on them. That's something they have to work through. But I think it's huge. I just commend you for that, because that's really huge.
I would like to stress for the audience, though, that you'll be amazed at what you're capable of
Yeah.
when you don't have a choice.
well, that's how you grow up. I mean, you grow up pretty quickly in that aspect, and you learn to
Hmm.
trust your instincts. You learn to trust
Yep.
the information that you have at that very moment.
Yeah.
Um, and so something in your gut, Joe, that said, "Hey, you know
Yep.
what? I I'm going to take charge, and I'm going to see what people's thoughts are." You talk to your children, and then that the decision that you made, but that also brings you a little bit more comfort, right?
Yep.
And when you play both roles, it's easy to second guess yourself and say, "Oh man, maybe I shouldn't have given the kids dessert before the meal," right? But the funny thing is that when you look back at these, they're humorous, right?
Yeah.
We're human.
Now.
We're
Yeah.
just we're dads, and we do things that may be goofy. We may do things that are a little strange. And it goes back to just how we interact in everyday life for companionship, right? Is we know who our spouse was. We loved who they were, and we're not looking to replace them. We're looking for a compliment. And sometimes it comes out in that role as you continue to talk to your friends or meet new people. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I feel like I'm more empathetic, where
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
thinking about my AJ in college versus AJ later in life, right? It's like your mentality is much more understanding of how others feel. And it kind of
Hmm.
ties back into what Adam said, is that emotional. I'm not an emotional person at all. I did not cry at the funeral. I kept a straight face. I knew people were looking at me to lead and bounce my emotions off of what they were feeling. And but I found that, like, when you interact with other people now, you're more understanding of what they're going through.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if they become emotional, you learn to let it go, to let them get it out as a part of saying, "Oh, you don't need to cry. It's okay." Like, you can't say that anymore because you don't know what they're going through. The same thing with others. And I think I found myself getting a little bit more empathetic. I wouldn't say I would be more emotional, but more empathetic and understanding to how others feel. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I have no idea like what just happened, and I formulate my own perception. And but you find yourself just gravitating to what you've learned and realize that the information you had at the time was probably the best information you were ever going to get to make that decision. And the people who want to complain and tell you that you made a wrong decision, they don't understand what it's like to be in your position. And when people tell me that, I look at them and I say, thank you. There's nothing for me to engage them with. I made my best of my ability, what I have to offer at this time. And if somebody doesn't like it, but maybe the next time I go through it, maybe I'll give a pause for thought. But definitely commend you for, Joe, having that difficult conversation, because again, you're trying to balance both, right? And with kids, with life companions, and people in general, coworkers,
Well, it's these new roles that we have to, that we're forced to take on. We didn't want to take these on. We don't want to be single. We don't want to be a Mr. Mom. We don't, but you have to.
Yeah.
And I'll bring up another one because it's a big one, and that's finances. Most couples aren't very democratic in their finance. Usually one person takes care of it or another. And one of the big things I hear in our in-person groups is, I don't know how to pay the bills. I don't know what to do about the retirement funds. I don't know what to do about the 529s. My husband did all that. My wife did all that. And you're suddenly thrust into that. And I hate to admit this because I was a finance professional, but I let my wife do all the household finances, and I had no idea what they were. I just trusted her. She took care of it. Yeah, it was wonderful. And so she dies, and I'm watching our bank account grow and grow and grow every month, and I'm thinking, boy, what was she spending money on? I really should look into this. Well, it turns out she had a Discover card in her name only from before we were married, and was running all the utilities through that and getting the points, right? Great idea. Well, Social Security notified Discover once the death certificate was filed, and they immediately canceled that. And 4 or 5 months down the road, I start getting notices that all my utilities are getting shut off. It's like, what the heck? And again, I'm not paying any attention, right? This was her thing. And it was right then and there I realized, all right, I have to take this role on again. And you know what you do? You roll up your sleeves and do it. And ask for help if you need help on your finances, because that's not something you did. Ask for help. I want that to be something to take out of this too. You're taking on a new role, so give yourself some leeway, give yourself some slack. Go ask for help when you're learning these new roles. So to finish my story real quickly, I thought that was a really great idea that she ran everything through Discover. So I opened up my own Discover and hooked all the utilities up there. You know what a pain that is with the death certificates and all that, and had it all set up to be running through there and getting the points again. And wouldn't you know it, the next month I lost my wallet with that Discover card in it and got to do it all again the month after that. And I'll laugh about it now, but again, at the time it was terrible. And I lost my wallet because of the stress of all these roles and things, and the grief and everything. I've never lost my wallet since. I never lost it before. Your brain isn't working. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there to kind of resonate with folks who maybe don't have children, that you probably do have financial roles that you might be taking on or trying to understand. And it's hard. It's really hard. It really makes you have to slow down and think about things while you're dealing with your grief too. So anyway, I don't know if you guys have stories like that too, but
I handle the finances, and but I will say for those in general, like, we all have passwords. Everything's a password, and we're
yep,
taught the logicals don't use the same password for every website, right? And what I hear a lot from people is that if something were to happen, like, how would I get access to know what bills need to be paid? How do I know what's outstanding? I mean, and that's something that, not to turn this into a financial discussion, but maybe, having, even if you're kind of playing mom and dad at the same time, but trusting somebody that you can share certain things with. So in case something inevitable does happen, right? And having those critical conversations, because yeah, that's scary. You get all your utilities being turned off, but you never even paid the bill and you didn't even know about things. And
yep,
it, it definitely is a challenge. There's no blueprint for what we go through
oh,
every day. And um, and again, we're still in grief, but we're managing so much at the same time. But yeah, I will tell you that the finances part, that's scary for a lot of people who have a loss of companionship. They may not know where the money is. They may find some, unfortunately, debt or
yep,
other finances that they never even knew that existed. And that's a whole nother challenging within itself, and goes back to the decision that you made a long time ago, Joe, is like, if you're in charge, like, it falls back on you, and you do the best you can to navigate through. I think, when my wife passed away, I think the greatest challenge I had was, it was not even like the finance part, it was more like, were all the baby pictures she was taking.
I, yeah,
It's
yep,
somewhere
yep.
in the cloud, but I don't know. I think it was, what website was it? It was a very famous website where everybody just uploaded their pictures to. Um,
There were
I
so
can't.
many of them, but
Yeah, I don't remember any. But it's like, I don't have the password, and now I feel like a hacker trying to guess all the passwords just so I can like build something for my daughter in the memory of her. My wife took all the pictures because she was home. So
yep.
that's where a lot of times we talk about role with children, with dating, the finances, just in general, our roles at the office where, people look at you with a different label. And how do you handle somebody's going behind your back saying, "Oh, he lost his wife," or she lost her spouse or something. Yeah, and that's tough too, because we don't know how to respond to that. We don't want to be labeled.
Yep.
And I think we over push ourselves to the point where we're just mentally exhausted at the end of each day, just juggling so much at the right time. But I think we're at today in our society that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on support. The key is finding the right support.
Right, and AJ, you brought up the photo thing, so it's okay to limit your roles too.
Yeah.
Uh, my wife was a scrapbooker and documented everything. So I have great records of my kids up until she died, and now you got to go on Facebook and get it, because that was something I chose not to do. That was something that she was very good at. We cherish those scrapbooks that she made. We love them. But sorry, kids, you don't exist after 12 unless you go into the cloud somehow, because I could not do that. And
Yeah.
don't feel bad in limiting roles. Pick and choose them carefully, and you're not going to replace the person you lost. So be careful in trying to do it all, because I'm sure we all tried to do that too.
hmm And I hate to use a corporate analogy, but in my life, I've been going through a lot of reorganizations and stuff like that. And a lot of times, when you go through reorganizations in the corporate world, you have to look at all the tasks that you have and say, can all these be performed? Do we need to stop things? Do we need to start new things? It's kind of the same way when you lose a spouse or lose a partner, and you have to look at all the things that you need to do. Can I continue all these things? Or like you have to kind of look at it from that perspective. Now, are we in the clearest state of mind when we have to make those decisions? Not really. So like my colleagues have both said, it's kind of like we've all been you just make the best decisions that you have at the time with the information you have.
Yep.
And as you go along, you grow, you get better, and you make better decisions because you're growing as a human. You're forced to become a different type of person because you're thrown into this new situation. And that defines the measure of a person, how you deal with that and how you get through that. And it looks different for everybody. And is it messy? Do you make mistakes? Do you make decisions that you probably regret? Yes. So all of those things. And guess what? That's okay. It's okay. You're not alone. We've all made mistakes. You talk to any person who's lost somebody as you're making those decisions and figuring out what roles to do and what things to pick up, what things to put down, like Joe was saying, you're gonna maybe make decisions that you'll regret later, but you just have to kind of learn from them each time. You know, talking about the finances side of things, I kind of handled everything and my wife didn't handle anything. And when she passed, I was like, man, what if I had passed? She would have been lost. And so now that I've gotten remarried, my wife and I, we look at everything together. We share everything. She knows all my passwords. I know all her passwords. So if something happened to either one of us, we wouldn't be lost. We would know exactly where to go. And so that's a lesson that I learned from my first time. And so it's like you have to take the new things that you're getting to and learn and grow and apply them in your life as you grow. And you know what? Your kids will see that. They'll see, oh wow, look at what dad's doing. Oh wow, look at the new things that he's doing. and they'll see you growing, and they'll appreciate it eventually. You know how kids are.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, you get some great stories though, right? Like all
Yeah.
the things that you made decisions on, some of the funny things that we shared here on this segment, and hopefully, people got a kick out of it, and we'll share what some of their most memorable, funny moments were. But we never stop growing. We never
Hmm.
stop growing in our role. To this day, right? My daughter just turned 16. She gets a lot of friends that come over, and I'm the dad. And my thought is like, okay, I have to make sure, do they need to be fed? Do I need to lock up the liquor cabinet?
Yeah.
Right? Now I'm thinking about, like,
Yep.
from a different perspective, right? Things I would never thought about. And then when I sit down with them,
Are there boys there?
yeah, and I have to ask the
Yeah.
question, and then I have to understand,
Yep.
and you start thinking about how you come across will make an impact on them. And it not only is an impact on your own family, but the impact of people around you, whether you are a young adult to a more seasoned adult. You're influencing everybody around you by how you behave, how you act. And the best advice that I can give anybody as we go through life, find humor in anything that we do.
Mm.
Find humor in different situations that help you heal. And ultimately, as we become different people with different new tools that we've acquired, we can do a much better job of helping others around us. We don't have all the answers, right? We're still looking for the manual from the hospital, but each day we grow a little stronger. Each day we have stories that we can share with others, companions, and people we meet for the first time, and sharing little funny aspects of things. And the greatest thing is coming on this thing, we can admit to some of our faults, right? I can't cook with anything, right? But I know how to dress my daughter in the nice clothes, right? But these are things that make the world go around. That's
Hmm.
important. And as we continue to evolve into both Mr. Mom roles, I mean, look, each of us are still acting like Mr. Mom at times. And
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Hopefully without the gossip. Hopefully without gossip.
Well, to quote the fans of Bridgerton, what's life without a little gossip?
Yes.
So, this has been a great session. I want to thank everybody for listening, for being a part. Please visit our website, nationalwidowers.org or mensgreetnetwork.org, and check out our other sessions. And we thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.